You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are die-hard Packers fans that we're not getting into national sports media talking points and headlines and all that nonsense. We're sticking with football, and we're getting into the top topics around the pack every week, breaking down games during the season and sorting through all of the drama and the rumors of the offseason. If you want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials and subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. All of those things help us out tremendously. Only take you a few seconds. So thank you so much to all of our listeners and subscribers. And before we get started, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers games tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How you doing, sir?
Good evening, Miles. I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Doing good. We got a little exciting stuff to talk about here tonight. For such a tough part of the off season that we're in. This is not a boring episode, I don't think.
No, just when you thought there'd be not too much to talk about, it's a quiet time of the off season.
Yeah,
we get the big news that there's going to be a new CEO, and who that is Ed Policy taking over about a year from now for Mark Murphy. So yeah, it's big news. I don't know if everybody realizes how important that role is with the Packers, since a lot of times it's kind of in the background, but it's big news. And it's exciting to have that today. And so we can sit here and discuss it tonight.
Yeah. And, I don't expect that a whole lot of people knew much about Ed Policy before this. I'm sure, some of the diehardest of diehards have maybe heard his name floating around in association with these, I guess the search. I won't call it negotiations, but the search committee that was going on. When they did it, I didn't know I needed to dive in. All right, who is Ed Policy? I knew that the search committee was out there, that was something that was coming up with Mark Murphy next year. And I'll be honest, the last time it happened, I didn't realize how impactful and important it was going from Bob Harlan to Mark Murphy. I was a lot younger, so I'm just, hey, hoping for the best here. Go, Pack, go. Now, this time around, I think that Packers fans in general are a little bit more aware of how impactful this really is after seeing, the tenure of Mark Murphy. I mean, he did a lot of good stuff, and I think that the general sentiment is he's probably underappreciated by most Packers fans. But I don't know. What were your initial impressions of Ed Policy and hearing that this is who it's going to be?
I wasn't surprised by it. He seemed to be the leader all along because he's been there for 12 or 13 years now and kind of had worked his way up to the C. I think he's the COO now.
Right.
And so he's been there. Yeah, he's been there, and I don't want to say they've been grooming him, but he's been Mark Murphy's right hand man.
2012.
Yeah, he's Mark Murphy's right-hand man. He's been around. He has experience. He was with, I think it was the Arena League for a while. He's Carmen Policy's son. Carmen Policy ran the 49ers for a long time. He ran them when they were winning Super Bowls in the 80s and 90s. So
it's important to note.
His dad had a really good reputation. So hopefully, Ed's the same way. But he's been there for a while. He seemed like he was the leader all along. There haven't been a whole lot of reports about who they've actually talked to. I know, one report came out that they talked to Jason Wright, who's with the Commanders. I think he's their president or something like that. That's the only name I've seen today that has come out. So I don't know how many people were true, finalists for this job. But it definitely seemed like it was going to be Ed Policy all along, and then it it would have been a surprise if it wasn't. But yeah, I think it makes tons of sense. And he's been in this role for a while now, and to keep it in house with somebody like that when it's gone so well, I think it's the right way to go. And I think saw it on Twitter today. I think it was Aaron Nagler who put it out there that the Packers are now in the business of drafting and developing CEOs, which I think is just great. They do it with quarterbacks. They kind of do it with GMs.
Be consistent, right? Yeah, I mean, they really have.
Yeah, CEOs. So,
Ted was kind of, groomed seems to be sort of a negative word these days, but, Ted was really trained by Ron Wolf, right? He's part of the Wolf tree, and he went off and did his thing and then came back. And then, Goody was there for, I think, the majority of Ted's tenure, right? Was he in there under Wolf? I can't remember when Goody got there, but he's been there a long time.
I think he was originally a Wolf, but later on in the Wolf years,
right, closer to the Ted years. But I mean, maybe I forget Mike Sherman was between the two.
Right.
But so for me, not understanding, who really is Ed Policy and what to expect, right? I think it might have been Andy Herman that made the jokes like we don't have film to break down of an executive, but without knowing anything and understanding that that's the line that they followed as far as who they selected, and he's been in the building for a long time and kind of been trained under the Packer way, so to speak, is what I called it earlier. And that made me feel good. That made me be like, all right, I'm at peace with this because this is how they do everything else, and that all seems to work, right? So this should be kind of along the same lines. And then you hear about what he was involved with over the last 12 years now. And I think that gives you a lot of reasons to be, I don't know about excited about an NFL executive, but confident that you're going to get a lot of the same Packer way, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm hoping for and expecting. I'm sure there's going to be some changes that he wants to do. He'll be a little bit different than Mark Murphy, who was a little bit different than Bob Harlan. But the general sense of it and the overall big picture, I think, it's just a continuation of the Packer way. And it should be, because they've been very successful. I know everybody can say, well, Murphy only had one Super Bowl and Bob Harlan had, but those are Super Bowls, and they've had 30 plus years of continued competitiveness and being a relevant team in the NFL, which is really tough to do. And they show that they can build. They found successful head coaches, they found successful GMs, they've found successful quarterbacks, and have gone through some really tough quarterback transitions. Like the way they do things, it works. So let's keep it up. This is somebody who is very much on the inside of things, so he knows, how it functions. So there's not going to be like a breaking in period or an introduction period. Like Murphy was an outsider, so there was some of that, getting to know you and getting a feel for things at first. Though, Murphy came in and within 6 months he was dealing with, the whole Brett Favre fiasco that went on, which was, a hell of a way to get introduced to Packers fans. And
welcome.
Yeah, but so at least, Ed Policy walks in and he knows the lay of the land. He knows how the organizations run. Right. He knows what they've done to be successful. So you won't have that huge kind of transition. Though I'm sure there's going to be little ways that he wants to tweak things and do things his own way, which is to be expected. But I don't think there's going to be any kind of major changes. I don't think he's going to be, a hands-on CEO that's going to be involved in every, player acquisition. He's not going to be in the draft room, telling them who to pick in the 5th round or anything like that. I think he'll continue to be pretty hands-off like Mark Murphy was.
Yeah. And I think that's what you hope for. Like I immediately started thinking about something else, that I've experienced in my life that on a much smaller scale is kind of similar. My wife's family has a family restaurant, and when I was younger, we worked in the family restaurant. And when we started working there, the chef that was there had been there for years, right? I think maybe 10 plus years. And man, the food was good, right? It was just on point, all of it. And all of a sudden, chef decides he's going to leave, right? Oh man, like you've got a great restaurant, great food. Like, man, they were just firing on all cylinders. Now the head chef's gone, right? And that's where, as a young person, I'm looking around like going, dang, man, what's going to happen? And the guy who stepped in, I don't think could have done better. I don't think anybody could have done better than the way he did it. He maintained the classics and what got them there, right? He did not overlook that, didn't try to shake it up, don't even second guess it, dance with the one that brung you. But there were like just little dabs of new, little sprinkles of new flavor here and there. Like, hey, here's a special you've never seen before, and here's a new appetizer you've never seen before, and just stuff like that started working its way in. I think that's what you hope for, right? Is like you want this guy to come in and leave the foundation. Foundation's good, it works, but we also don't want to not innovate, right? Like you don't want to get stuck in we've always done it this way, so this is how we're going to do it. You've got to leave room for innovation where innovation is needed. And Ed Policy, reading up on him and kind of understanding how he fits into just Green Bay in general right now. He's been in the city for 12 years with his family. You know what I mean? It's like, right. You're not worried about, does this guy even get Green Bay? Dude, he gets Green Bay, right? Like he's part of it, right? He's in the community. He's tasted it. He's been there, through some great Aaron Rodgers years, and now he's seeing the upswing of the Love years. Like he's seen all of that, man. And so you don't have to worry about, somebody coming in and just, man, this guy just doesn't get it. That I think gives me comfort. And then he's still a younger guy, right? He comes from an interesting background, with his father being who he is. He's got strong education, but he's still, probably has a more fresh perspective than Mark Murphy on a few things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair to say. Like he's got experience, and he's got experience from the business side, but he also has NFL experience, having seen it with the 49ers with his dad, but now being in it with the Packers. And he's done a lot in the business world outside of the NFL. And he had a big hand in Titletown District. And, say what you will about that, but it's been really successful, and it's been a revenue maker for the Packers, which they need. I mean,
yes, right.
So he's had a big hand in that. He's had a big hand in a lot of the community relations with the team. So, yeah, I mean, he's 52, 53 years old, which isn't that old for a role like this, but he's experienced as well. And he knows how the NFL works, from, again, going back with his father, but from being there and being Mark Murphy's right-hand man all these years. And more importantly, he knows how everybody in that building at 1265 functions and what their strengths and weaknesses are and how to manage those people. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world for them to go this route and hire, well, not hire, but promote Ed Policy. And I'm excited for it. I don't think, as Packer fans, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot changing. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this to me is sort of building on like why the Packers don't want or need an owner, right? Like You talk about Titletown and I get it. 'Cause listen, I went to my first game at Lambeau when it was still a green and yellow building. You know what I mean? Like I've seen this thing grow up, so to speak, and tailgated for I think all of those in a house just like a few houses down from Lambeau. So like this isn't somebody who didn't taste like the true Packers tailgating, like classic Lambeau experience multiple times, fortunately. But what Titletown is just like it's another. It's a form of security, right? It keeps them from needing an owner, and him being behind that is I think really a big deal because it kind of shows you what he's capable of. You look at Titletown; it's done very tastefully. It's a cool place, and it is unfortunate to see some of those old classic places disappear. But the alternative is probably even worse, right? As far as Packers fans would be concerned. And what you have here, like I said, you have a Green Bay guy, you have a guy who's been there, a guy who, wants to be there. He said this is the best job in sports, I think is what his words were.
Yeah.
And teams that have an owner, and you can throw out all the examples that are out there. They get these guys, especially these new ones. They get these guys who come in. They're not coming in from sports. They're coming in from all sorts of other industries. And look, like, talent is talent, and if you've accomplished big things, that's great. There's certainly individuals out there proving that you can excel in multiple industries, but like, you don't want that coming into Green Bay. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's anybody out there that wants some like hotshot executive from some other industry to come in and think that he can, be the savior of the Packers for the next couple decades. Like, that's just like the anti of what you want. You don't want that. And I think that that's exactly the opposite of what Ed Policy is. He's a Green Bay guy, and so I think you can trust him to maintain some of that tradition that needs to be maintained. My biggest question, and this is the thing that, like, man, I just totally unforgivable. If they ever name that stadium anything besides Lambeau Field, we riot. Like, you cannot change the name. Don't you dare. And I don't think Ed Policy would. And I think Titletown is a part of that, right? Like, not needing to. You don't need the revenue from naming rights. Go get that revenue somewhere else. That's how I feel about it.
That was something that Mark Murphy's always said. He said, we're never putting a name on that stadium other than Lambeau. Hopefully that always continues and holds up. But that's part of why they need Titletown District, and that's part of why they're doing all these stadium renovations, and they have stuff going on there, and they're trying to get soccer games and college football games and concerts in there, because they have to find all the revenue they can. And sometimes, it sucks because it might hurt some other businesses, but they need to draw people in, because all these other, being a small market Green Bay, you're going up against Dallas and New York and Philly and some of these huge markets that they have billionaire owners, and then they're able to bring in all this revenue and all these money. Like, there's always something going on in some of these places. And Green Bay, not that it's bad, I'm not knocking Green Bay, but it's a smaller town. You have to be able to generate the revenue, and they don't have the billionaire owner that can back it. So that's why they've, put sponsorships on everything. And it sucks to see, they have their own tailgating building now and has a sponsor, and they have put a sponsor on the kids riding the bikes in training camp. And I get why people get annoyed by that, and they get, Murphy takes a lot of heat from some Packer fans about it, but you got to look at the big picture. It's like, they need to generate revenue, and they're kind of limited in how much they can do. Yep. I mean, look at, you live near Dallas. There's always something going on at Jerry Jones's stadium.
Literally, Jerry is building another Jerry World. That is, I'm not joking. That is not a joke. So you have the stadium, Jerry World #1, the big spaceship-looking thing in Arlington that the Packers have had so much success in. You have Jerry World #2, which is up in Frisco. It's probably about 45 minutes away from Jerry World #1. All right, so call it Jerry Land. But that's where they live, right? Like, that's where the Cowboys are practicing. That's where the offices are. That's where everything's going down. They call that the Star, right? And then it's not only a full, impressive, like, indoor facility. Like, I think it's a 12,000 seat, stadium inside that the Cowboys call a practice facility, but neighboring high schools call that home. So they've got this sweet Cowboys level indoor stadium seating 12,000. It's ridiculous, dude. The amount of revenue that Jerry Jones is raking in for being mediocre for 3+ decades, or I won't say plus because they're right on the cusp of like greatness right there, but for 3 decades, that's just it hurts. It hurts me as a Packer fan to see that, because, and this is something that Ed Policy knows, this is something Mark Murphy knew too, and this is why a lot of their decisions were made. The Packers have to be successful. They're not going to get away with what Jerry gets away with, right? He's building all these fancy toys for people in the local communities and raking in absolute billions that is not the Cowboys taking the field, right? Like, it's outside of the Cowboys taking the field. We'll just call it that. But Yeah, you don't want that, right? Like, I mean, you first of all, Green Bay, you can't do that. Like, it's just not there. You don't have the number of people to produce that kind of revenue there.
Yeah.
But you also don't want that, because here's what Cowboys fans don't have is the ability to fire Jerry Jones. Right? If Jerry Jones is mediocre until he dies, which he's going to do the Al Davis thing. He'll run the thing till he's gone. And he'll be 8-8 the whole time. And they'll keep just underachieving. I think today there was some stuff coming out about, McCarthy's not happy, whatever. But, yeah, I mean, the fans here, they can't, like, turn it off and hold him accountable. Green Bay fans can. All right? Like, if the Packers aren't doing well, you're like, not that you won't sell tickets. You'll sell tickets, but Titletown won't do as much as it does. The Pro Shop won't do what it does. Tailgating won't do what it does. It won't be the spectacle. It'll be the diehards that have been on the season ticket list forever. You won't lose that, but that's not enough revenue for them to survive. That's the whole point. You have to be able to, and I'll tell you this, as they can put sponsorships on whatever they want outside of the naming rights of that stadium. Don't you like you said, don't touch that. But yeah, you know what? Dream Drive, all this other stuff, the tailgating section, it's like, cool. You know what? Make the revenue you got to make without completely selling out, getting an owner, giving away naming rights, all the other just like pathetic things. I think the Big 12 that is selling out their naming rights. Did I hear that?
Yeah, I saw that. They may be having a corporate name instead of the Big 12.
It's like the All-State 12 or something.
Something like that, yeah.
That to me is just so weird and gross. Like, it's just too far. And that's why, like,
yes.
We can't predict the future, but with a hire like Ed Policy, that selection to me says that they care about the tradition. They want to protect as much tradition as they can, and he seems like a guy who can do that.
Right, protect the tradition, but understand where it's going in the future and where you are right now. And you can't live in the past, but you can respect it and keep it and cherish it.
Yeah,
but you also got to keep the team moving forward, both obviously on the field, and that's the most important thing. And from the business side of it, you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep trying to compete with these bigger market teams with the billionaire owners, because you need that money. You need that money, and it goes right back to the football team. So I think it's a good hire. I think it's a smart hire. I'm looking forward to it. I like his experience. I like his background, and I like that he's been in the building, for 12 years now. So he knows how it's run. And so I expect them to maintain what they've been doing and, keep that Packer way intact.
Absolutely. So we'll jump into some comments here real quick as we got some friends joining us as we usually do. Matthew Tan and his friend Carly, thanks y'all for listening. He says, you guys really rock. We appreciate that. Always appreciate that. R jumping in. Our Showers, good to see you. Hopefully the new guy stays in his lane and resume. His resume is excellent. Yes, I agree. I think that's kind of the theme of how we've said it here. It's like, stay in your lane, and we expect that he will do that. And let's keep this thing humming. Maintain the Packer way. So I think he will. But and then let's see here. R also says they also admit their mistakes early. Ray Rhodes comes to mind. Yeah, Mike Sherman too. No doubt about that. So, the beauty of it is you have a board of directors. So if for some reason Ed Policy just goes totally off the rails, you have a mechanism to correct a mistake. Where it's like I'm saying, like with Cowboys fans, they don't have that with Jerry Jones. You're stuck with him, and then you hope that Steven's better after that. Because that's where it's headed. It's a very predictable direction. Good luck deviating, and hopefully they're better than 8-8 for your sake. But that's where, like, as a Packers fan, I think it's hard to have anything negative to say about this, Let's see here. We got another comment from Bite Me. I like the hire at face value here. Appears to have great outside experience and is a long-term vet from within the Packers organization, so he has the best of both worlds. Yeah, agree. Totally agree. I'm excited. His dad running the 49ers, we can't, like, downplay that. That's a pretty big deal. Like, it's just there's so many all-time greats from that era that it's just like
Right.
being able to have a firsthand account of that. It really does make me think a lot about like Jordan Love getting to sit and watch Aaron Rodgers win 2 straight MVPs and have him on the knocking on the door of the Super Bowl. Like just having a front row seat to that. Like I mean, all access pass, like not front row seat. It's like seriously, like who had more access to Aaron Rodgers during that time than Jordan Love? Like not many people. Apparently not his family. But anyway, not the time for that.
And just from a personal standpoint, like just you've had a father and now a son running 2 different franchises, 2 of the best and most historic franchises in football.
Oh, yeah.
So that's it's pretty
Super
significant
Bowls.
there. Yeah, a lot of Super Bowls.
A lot of Super
A
Bowls.
lot of Hall of Famers.
Absolutely. So, yeah, very exciting. And, in all of this, we cannot lose sight of appreciation for Mark Murphy.
Yep.
And nobody's 100%. We're not giving a guy 100%. Everybody makes their mistakes. But, in the total of his tenure with the Packers, I certainly appreciate what he's done. In all of it, right? You can look at that time from what was it, 2007? Yeah, the end of the 2007 season. So 2008 was the first season that he was at the helm. From 2008 till now, that's a pretty fun time of Packer football. There's a couple little valleys there, but that's a lot of fun Packer football that Mark Murphy delivered for us.
Yeah, I mean, he came in right at the end of that 2007 season when they went to the championship game against the Giants. We know how that turned out. But then, within 6 months on the job, he's dealing with Favre's retiring. No, Favre's coming back. No, we don't want him back. And now think about it. He was an outsider. He wasn't part of the organization. He's stepping into huge shoes of Bob Harlan, who's one of the all-time great executives in Packers history. I mean, we could do a Bob Harlan appreciation podcast all to itself. But he's stepping in for Bob Harlan, which is incredibly tough to do. Yeah. So he steps into that role. And you're inheriting Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy, who you don't know. You've never worked with them. You have no background on them. And here's Brett Favre retiring. Now he wants to come back, and they're saying, we don't want him to come back. We're going to turn it over to Aaron Rodgers, who hadn't really played, hadn't started. He, played a little bit, played in a Dallas game where he, came in when Favre was hurt and played well. But that was all we really saw of him. And you're new to this, and you're just saying, okay, I'm going to back Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy, who you don't know. You've never worked with them, and you know who Brett Favre is. He's a superstar. He sells tickets. He sells merchandise for your team. He's, gives you national acclaim. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Like, he could have very easily told those guys, like, nah, bring him back. Like, we're not moving on from Brett Favre. But he backed them, and they didn't handle it perfectly. And neither did Favre. Some of the things that trying to offer him a marketing contract to keep him retired, like
go away, stay home, ride the tractor, send us videos, it'll be great.
Oh my God, yeah. He did not handle that perfect, but it's his first time. Nobody did, and cut him with some slack. But like, you're new to the job and you're stepping into that, and they handled it, not perfectly, but look how it turned out. Pretty well.
It turned out well.
Yeah, and within 2 years, they're winning the Super Bowl.
I'd say if you're looking at sitting before Favre walks away, like what was that, like 2006, call it? If you're sitting in 2006 saying, hey, Favre is not going to be the quarterback of the Packers here soon, but you're going to win a Super Bowl like a couple years after that. Be like, oh, what? No way. Right. Okay, fine. You take that, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know, like Mark Murphy, I don't know that you can do a better job than winning a Super Bowl just a couple years after replacing an all-time great quarterback. I mean, right. That's why the Bears fans and the rest of the NFC North is just so sick over the fact that we might have a third one. Probably do have a third one.
Right, and they handled that transition very well. They handled it
as well as you could.
Right, they handled it differently than Favre's. Different situation, different player, all that, but they handled it pretty well. And they're being proven that they were right again with when to move on. and with the next quarterback. And, you know, he inherited Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy, and he kept them. And you can make the argument about Ted. Maybe he left Ted in the job a little bit too long, you know, especially we don't know Ted's health at that point. But he was loyal to him. He wasn't getting involved, and he was hands off, I guess. Could he have made the move sooner? Yeah. I guess.
But Ted did give us Kenny Clark and Aaron Jones. Like he didn't. He went out with a bang.
And it wasn't like he hurt the franchise too much or set him back by staying with Ted. And then he hires Brian, and Goody's done a really nice job. I mean, and he's no Joe Douglas, but he's done a nice job. And I know a lot of people bashed Mark Murphy for when he fired McCarthy, you know, in December of that year. And why wouldn't you let McCarthy coach out those final games? And I kind of get it, but I never had a problem with it. It was like, if you know he's going to be gone, make the move so you don't have to trot him out there. Because the rest of that season, him and the players would have been constantly
everybody knew.
Yeah, they would have been constantly in front of the media. What's your job status? What are you going to be back? Like, why put
That's
him
not
through
productive.
that? Right?
Yeah.
So he knew, and then he was very much involved in the hiring of Matt LaFleur. That's gone pretty well too. So I know sometimes he gets in front of a microphone and says things that don't sound so good. Right.
We should thank him for that, man. He gave us some very entertaining moments.
Yeah. And I know all the corporate sponsorships and stuff drive people nuts at times, but his big decisions have really worked out. And look at the money this team brings in. I know as Packer fans, it's not our number one concern, but they bring in revenue. They have revenue streams that they didn't have before. He's getting the NFL draft to come to Green Bay next year.
That's a big deal. And we're all excited about that. Nobody's mad about that. That is so cool.
Right. They had their rebuilding was 1 year. Last year was their rebuilding year, and they won 9 games in a playoff game. That's all the rebuilding they've done under Mark Murphy. Yeah. Right? Like, he's handled huge franchise-altering decisions at quarterback twice, changing one of the best head coaches in franchise history, a Super Bowl winning head coach, highly successful general manager, and he's made the right decisions each time. Like, it's
and they weren't necessarily obvious and easy decisions. You know what I mean? Like the GM decision. I know there was a lot of people that wanted Elliott Wolf, and there's some scrutiny on that process. And
same with LaFleur.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was kind of surprised. Like, LaFleur was the hire. Like, nobody. He wasn't highly.
A little bit out of left field. Yeah.
Right. And 2 quarterback transitions when both quarterbacks still wanted to play and still could play. And you had teams that were, somewhat in content. I mean, Favre, they were coming off a championship game, and Rodgers, I know they had the last year they were, they lost it didn't make the playoffs, but the previous years they were in the NFC championship game. So he took some big swings and huge, decisions that would greatly impact the future of the franchise that could have sunk them for years to come. And he's been right with them.
And that happens. Like, we see it as Packers fans. We can all admit we're spoiled. You know what I mean? Like, you can look around the league, and every year, like, okay, now this coach is on his way out. This coach is on his way in. Oh, okay, cool. Let's see what happens. And then a year later, that coach is on his way out. Another coach is on his way in. It's like, dang, man, like that doesn't like that kind of a carousel of leadership. That doesn't help player development. You know what I mean? Like, we can sit here and sort of see it almost like a video game of interchanging pieces, but man, when you don't have stability and consistency at a leadership level, like, that is tough to work with. It's tough to be a good player in the NFL when you don't have that. So the Packers having that, Mark Murphy not only navigating it well, but getting those decisions right without having to get them wrong, like horribly wrong first. Like, what team hasn't had to do that? You know what I mean? Like, who has navigated all of those massive transitions so well? I mean, there's not. I don't think there's other good examples out there.
No, I mean, the one team that kind of they remind me of with their stability is the Steelers. But the Steelers, I mean,
even
they don't have a quarterback. Like, they haven't handled the transition from Roethlisberger.
No,
and they're kind of like stuck in the middle. Like, yeah, they don't have a losing season, but they get to the playoffs and don't do anything. Like, they're not as successful as the Packers, right? And now the huge decisions that he had to make, and I know it's not all him, and I'm not giving him all the credit, but
Well, but
those,
as the leader, he's the one responsible for, gathering
yeah,
the right folks to
and
make those decisions.
and he's not a GM that's going to step in there and tell him what free agents to keep or to sign or what draft picks to make. He's only stepping in there for the big ones, which are the two quarterback transitions, the head coach and the GM. Other than that, he stays out of football, which is a really good thing. But then again, if you also think about it, like this is a guy that played NFL football, that was head of or one of the heads, one of the leadership of the players union. Like, so if there's an owner or CEO in the NFL that probably could make some football decisions, it might be Mark Murphy because he might know a little bit about it, but he stays out of it and lets his GM and head coach make those decisions. So he's just been in there on Rodgers and Favre and LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, and he got them all right.
Yeah.
Like he got them all right.
That is a tough streak to get right. Like even like just one getting it wrong, you could kind of understand. Like, yeah, it's a tough thing,
And
but he got them all right.
look what he's handing off to Ed Policy. I mean,
It's a pretty good situation.
He's got a head coach, he's got a quarterback, he's got a GM, he's got a young team that's
The youngest
a contender, the youngest team.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that's already contending. Yeah.
right.
And the ROI they're getting on their receivers is insane. Like
Yes.
that was one of the things I tweeted this week. Just absolutely nuts. Let me see if I can dig this up for us here. But
But it's that's part of the overall structure, like the contracts and like when they decide to move on from people. And I know as Packer fans, sometimes it sucks, but they have a philosophy, and more often than not, the GM's right. And you don't see Mark Murphy step in and say, no, Aaron Jones, he's such a good leader. He's a good player when he's healthy. He's great with the community. We have to keep him. You can't cut him. He says, if you think that's the right decision,
he supports
go ahead. We'll support it. So, I mean, Bob Harlan, to me, nobody's going to top Bob Harlan, but for Mark Murphy to be the next guy after him, that was pretty damn good. And I didn't live through the dark years of the 70s and 80s, but I know the board of directors was very involved in this team.
Yeah.
Too involved. And that was a big reason why they had the dark ages. And Bob Harlan came in and pushed them out and said, no, you're not going to be involved in any of this. And that's how he got Ron Wolf to be his GM, because Ron Wolf didn't want anybody breathing down his neck. And so Harlan started it all. And we know the success they had under Bob Harlan and Ron Wolf, Mike Holmgren, all those years. And Murphy's continued that. And he's built the business side of it because he has to compete with the way the NFL is run now.
Yeah. Well, and it's one massive challenge to do what Harlan and Wolf did, resurrecting a franchise essentially and having the balls to go get Reggie White and, all the things that they did. Yeah. But it's an entirely different challenge. I'm not going to make an argument what's harder or not. But to maintain that, I think Mark Cuban once said it's tough to get to the top, but it's tougher to stay at the top. And not that the Packers have just always been at the top, but as far as being competitive, again, making these decisions, making the right decision, doing it in a way that you're just consistently competitive, consistently in the playoffs, consistently knocking on the door, consistently got a franchise quarterback. That I would say is being at the top. Like that's what, Harlan kind of handed off to Murphy was, hey, I got you back here. Favre's been knocking on the door for years. What does it take to get over that hump? Oh, by the way, you got to replace Favre. But totally different challenges. And I just don't think that you could have done a better job as Mark Murphy. I don't think there's a better job he could have done with what he had. And, here he's not gone yet, right? He's still leadership here, and he's responsible for the GM that got you this return on receivers. Let me read this. So in 2024, Cooper Kupp's cap hit will be $31.3 million. Last year, he had 737 yards and 5 touchdowns. In 2024, Michael Thomas, receiver for the Saints, so his cap hit is $12.4 million. Last year, he had 448 yards and a touchdown. the Packers receiver room, the whole room, their cap hit in 2024 will be $11.5 million. That's less than Michael Thomas. Certainly less than Cooper Kupp. Their stats last season were 2,470 yards, 2,470 yards, and 25 touchdowns. When you are spending less than other teams and getting multiple production, I mean, look at that, 25 times the touchdowns that they're getting over Michael Thomas. Like, that's insane. Like, if you translate that to like Wall Street type of ROI perspective, that is absolutely insane. What Goot is getting here. So that's where, and these guys are not just this year, but also next year, and probably most of them the following year will be around. This Mark Murphy doesn't have to be the guy that decided to do that, right? He is doing exactly what Jerry Jones never would, which is, hey man, I'm going to hire the smart guy and get the heck out of his way. You know, as long as we're talking about leaders, like another great leader, oh gosh, why am I blanking? Steve Jobs, he talked about hiring people that were smarter than him to make him look good, right? Like he got out of the way. He's like, hey, you're smarter than me. Go do this. I'm going to get out of your way. And he held them to high standards too. But yeah, hats off to Mark Murphy for the job that he's done.
Absolutely. The
team that he's got in place right now, top to bottom, front office to the field. Yeah. Thank you, sir. We lift our beverages to you, whatever beverage you got right now, water. I got a little coffee to keep me going through the podcast. Lift our beverages to Mark Murphy. Appreciate that. And hopefully he's sending us out with another final great decision with that policy.
And hopefully we can send him out with a Super Bowl ring.
Oh, man, that would be really special, wouldn't it? That'd be pretty special. Let's sign Mark Murphy out with one more ring. That would be that'd be pretty cool. We got a couple other comments in here. Our Shower's bringing in some contrary to his own point, but he says one criticism to counter my previous point: we were a year late on Favre and Rodgers. I don't know.
Not on Favre. Maybe.
I think it's hard to argue Favre because they were in the NFC Championship game and that roster was kind of a veteran roster built for that time. I don't know that they were a year late on Favre. You could probably make the argument on Rodgers. 2022 was a stinker, man. That sucked.
Yeah, you can make the argument if they were a year late on Rodgers. I was fully in on bringing him back in 22, so I
was definitely in on that at the time.
Yeah.
I think hindsight, you can look at that and
you could
definitely see in the previous offseason when Russell Wilson got what he got, your return on Rodgers would have certainly been higher a year sooner, but they still got pretty good return on him. Like when you look at the list of players that they got for him, it's a pretty good list. It's turning out to be. I think they won the trade, but obviously we're biased as we sit here.
I don't think there's any question they won the trade.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be biased.
I'm happy to be biased, but I don't think a Jets fan's going to make a good argument anyway.
No, I'd love to hear their argument because I don't know how you can argue that the Packers didn't win that trade. But regardless, that's another topic.
Right. No, and Tyler's calling it out. Late on Rodgers, the haul they could have gotten from Denver would have been crazy. I totally agree. Would have been nuts. But again, and that's where I think you can't be perfect on every decision. But in that situation, it was probably the safest decision to say run it back, right, and do what they were doing where they were kicking the can down the road. From just sort of an overall fan morale perspective, if he were to break up the band that previous offseason, I think it would have been a lot more controversial. There would be a lot more split opinions about what Rodgers could have done. I think seeing him play out his time in 2022, at least for me, that gave me some closure. It was like, yep, time's up. Get him the hell out of here. I was done in that Detroit game when he threw 3 interceptions. I was like, get the guy out of here. I would rather watch Jordan Love struggle right now than watch this crap. You're paying a guy to be a Hall of Fame quarterback and he's playing like a rookie. It was so frustrating. So I think that gave me some closure, made it easier to say goodbye. Yeah. But hey, again, maybe he didn't make the perfect decision, Mark Murphy, in that, and I think it's still just kind of arguable, but he got a good haul. And you can't argue with what the team did last season in their first season without Aaron Rodgers, and certainly nobody's bringing pessimism to the table now as we approach this next season. I haven't heard it. Anybody got any pessimism? Bring it to us in the comments. Let's duke it out. Maybe there's a Bears fan lurking. We can get him out here talking some smack. But no, I think, hats off and cheers to the Mark Murphy era. I really enjoyed it. That has been some of the best football fan memories that I've had. So yeah, here to Mark Murphy. And then let's go a little bit off football for a second, if we can. I know this is a little off brand for us, but send out a congrats to our boy Jordan Love as he got engaged. What was it, this past weekend? Love to see that. Looks like a great, happy couple. Very happy for them. My theory is that he pushed off contract negotiations until after this big life event. As all of us are sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for a Jordan Love contract, it makes a lot of sense that it hasn't happened yet. If I was him, that's the way I would have approached it. I would have said, hey, football, hang on a second. I got some business to take care of here. And he certainly did. So very happy for him. Congrats to Jordan Love. Any thoughts, Tim?
He gave out a ring. Now, hopefully he can go get a ring for him and his teammates.
Yes. Go get us a ring, brother. That's what I love to hear. I like that. So happy for Jordan Love. Happy to see him. It looks like he's got a beautiful bride-to-be. They look like a great couple. And I know that they've been kind of, some social media. They're getting a little social media attention lately. So people, I think, are overall very happy for him. Let's see here. As we got a few comments rolling in. Tyler says, Love may not have been ready in 22, though. He may have needed that extra year. I agree. I think that it was probably halfway through 2022 when Love was clicking, because that's when we got to see him come in against the Chiefs. And, not that was a great game, but he didn't play he didn't scare you. At least he didn't scare me. He looked like he could handle himself. That's what I was looking for in that game.
It was the Eagles game in 2022 when he came in and Rodgers got knocked out and he played.
That's what it was. The Eagles game.
Yeah, the Eagles game.
Okay.
And it was like, whoa. And I remember thinking at the time, like, Rodgers already had the broken thumb, and then he had, I think it was a rib injury. And it was like, you know what? If he's hurt, don't rush him back. I want to see what Jordan's going to look like the rest of the year, because it wasn't going so well. And then Aaron came back and they won games to get in contention for the playoffs. But yeah, that was the one where I was like, okay, he looks a lot better than when we saw him preseason, and maybe they had something there, but we'll never know. I think it was good for him to sit for another season in 22, but maybe it would have helped his development, and he would have had a similar year in 22 that he had in 23. But we'll never know.
We'll never know. But it was, and I remember kind of making a lot of jokes about it, but there were so many parallels from the transition, with Love and Rodgers and Favre. And for me, when we were going through that at that point in the 2022 season, it felt like Rodgers knew Love was probably ready, or ready enough that if he was hurt and he was sitting out for any period of time, Love wasn't going to let go. You know what I mean? At that point, as long as Rodgers was still the starter, getting him into contention, still being kind of the guy, and, you still don't know about Jordan Love, Rodgers had a lot more leverage in that situation. You know what I mean? There's a lot more leverage to say that, well, you don't know what you got in Jordan Love, and, do you want me? If you want me, you got to keep rolling out the red carpet and guessing what I want next, and all of that. And I think Goot was over that to be, already.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that was one of the reasons Aaron Rodgers was being such an Iron Man about his injuries in a seemingly lost season. There were some questions there at one point where it's like, dude, do you even need to be playing right now? Why just let Jordan Love have some reps? But I think that's what it was.
It seemed like at that time, the Eagles game, because they lost, I forget what their record was, but it seemed like it wasn't going to turn around. It was almost like maybe he'll shut it down. He realized it's not going anywhere. He'll shut it down because he knows at the end of the season he's going somewhere else anyway. So
right,
but he didn't, and I mean I give him credit for that. And maybe it wasn't his mind too. if I take a game off, I'm not getting back in there because Jordan's going to play well, maybe. But whatever
and he
it
loses
was,
a lot of leverage in the offseason at that point.
yeah, yeah, sure. But who knows? I mean, I give him credit for playing through the injuries and coming back and at least getting them to the point where they could have made the playoffs.
He proved he was still Aaron Rodgers. There was no doubt that he did that, but it really was interesting the way that it unfolded and all that. But we're not here. We're not there anymore. Now we're in a different place, right? We got Jordan Love, and they are knocking down the door. Tyler brings up a fun point here. He says, so what's the protocol for how much you should spend on the ring when you're about to make $50 million a year? But I don't know, man. He's still only making the rookie deal, so you can't. I don't know. He already bought the ring, right? He doesn't have the new money yet, so you can't buy that new money ring yet because he don't have the new money. So I don't know. It looked like they were on a nice vacation, though.
Yeah, he's well off. I'm sure that ring was mighty expensive.
Yeah. Probably we'll say it cost enough.
I don't think he was. Yes, I'm sure it cost enough. I don't think he was hurting. Reaching in his pockets too far to find the money for it. So
no, I think it's probably enough. And you don't want to put too much on the finger, man. He's gonna get her hand cut off in some of these places. You know what I mean? Like, let's got to be discreet. Downplay it a little bit. But no, all jokes aside, definitely happy for Jordan Love. They definitely look like a happy couple. And again, you've given a ring, sir. Now time to go get one. We want that one. We want it to be big. We want that sucker. I mean, that should be like a car on your finger. That no limits as far as that one goes. But we'll leave that one up to Ed Policy maybe. I guess would Mark Murphy maybe have the hand in that since it's like his last year if they would win it? He'd probably. I
mean, he's still there till July of next year. So.
Yeah. So he would probably be the one in charge of or leading the team to design the rings, but can't design the rings yet. They got to win the games first. So let's talk about a few of those. It's a little bit early, but we can at least start looking at who's who and what's what. Most of the team building has probably been done. So, we wanted to sort of take a breeze at the first 4 games. We're not going to do any kind of deep, in-depth analysis, just sort of look at, how the depth charts stack up a little bit. What do you think we're going to be expecting? But as we approach those games, we'll obviously do some more in-depth analysis the week of as we do once the season kicks off. But we start the season against Philadelphia down in Brazil, and Philly is an interesting roster. So, and Tim, you're up in PA, man. You're not far, right? Are you closer to Philly or are you closer to Pittsburgh?
Near Philly. I'm like half hour from Philly.
So you're in Eagles territory.
Yes, very much so.
So what's the talk in Eagles territory? Like, I could probably give you the Cowboys talk right now. Like, what's the Eagles territory talk?
Well, for being a playoff team last year, man, they were killing everybody. The head coach, probably number 1, Nick Sirianni.
Jeez.
And I think they started
at 10. Ruthless, man.
Right. They went to the Super Bowl the year before. They're ready to – but they did start 10-1 last season, and then from there it was a disaster.
It was a disaster.
And he fired both of his coordinators. In fact, he fired a defensive coordinator during the season. Then
I remember that. Yep.
Matt Patricia was the replacement. He was even worse. For a few days thereafter, they went to the playoffs and got humiliated by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In a game where, if you remember it was a Monday night game. Troy Aikman's doing the game. He was questioning like their effort level in the playoff game. That ain't good, and you could see it. They looked right. So it was a few days before it was clear that Sirianni was going to keep his job. Like, he had to go and meet with the owner and like, here's my plan. Here's what we're going to do, for the owner to say, okay, I'm going to bring you back. So he's very much on the hot seat. There's a lot of Eagles fans. I think and this is weird for Eagle fans because they're either like so over the top with their arrogance, they're playing in the Super Bowl parade, or they're just like, they want to fire everybody after any loss.
There's just no middle ground.
There's kind of like, it seems like sort of a middle ground. There's a lot of people still bashing Sirianni, and rightfully so. I don't think he's that good of a head coach.
He seems kind of spastic.
Yeah, and he's kind of got that reputation. I think he's kind of I'm s- I don't know a nice way to say it. He's just spastic, probably a nicer way of saying what I'm thinking. Um, I just don't think he's that good of a head coach, and I think he kind of has
No.
lived off having good coordinators. And then last year when he didn't, he fired him, and we kind of got to see like the team played spastic and they fell apart, and he wasn't able to dig them out of it. And his moves, whatever he did, just made it worse. So now he's got veteran coordinators in there who are going to try to save his job for him. So I think there's a lot of Eagle fans that aren't really believing in Sirianni right now, but then they look at the roster and like, man, we
It's a
got
strong
pretty
roster.
right. But and I think they did win 11 games last year, but it was misleading because they were awful in December and January. Like
Yeah.
their defense couldn't stop anybody. The offense regressed badly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions there. It's a tricky opener too because again, like I said, they have the two new coordinators, Vic Fangio, right? So we know him as Packer fans. He's the new defensive coordinator. He's coming off a rough year in Miami where the players were happy to see him leave, and that hasn't been the case. Fangio's got the great reputation, for his defense, but he had a bad year in Miami. The Eagles seem to think he's going to stabilize things. They brought in Kellen Moore. He was in Dallas for a while. He was with the Chargers last year, so it's a little bit of an unknown for the Packers as far as preparing for them the first game because you don't know exactly what you're going to see. The Eagle defense was awful last year. It's got to be better. It can't be as bad as it was last season. I just don't know how much better, and especially week one, it might take them some time to gel. So it could be one of those things where you're a little bit unprepared. There's the unscouted looks, but maybe you're also catching them at the right time because they're not fully yet on the same page with a new defense.
There's a
Apparently,
lot of
a
things
new
that have to come
offense.
together for those guys in that first game.
Yeah, and being up here, it's kind of weird with the offense because at first, Kellen Moore saying it's going to be a blend of the two systems, and then it sounded like they were going to keep a lot of what they were doing previously, which doesn't make any sense because it wasn't working. And now, like recently, it's come out and Jalen Hurts, I think, said something like it's 95% different. So now people are like, well, what's the truth? And if it's that much different, like, what the hell is Nick Sirianni doing? Like, that was his offense, and now he's,
Well, I'll tell you one
somebody
thing.
from the outside. So it's a weird kind of like dynamic. Like, what are they going to be?
Well, there was nobody more happy to see the Eagles sign Kellen Moore than Cowboys fans. And
Yeah,
that tells you a lot. Oh,
he's
by the
got
way, he did not do many favors to the talent that he had in I was about to say San Diego, but with the Chargers.
no. They did
Um,
not have a good year.
no. And you've got one of the best up and coming quarterbacks in the league. I'm not like
Eh.
Herbert's got
Herbert.
he is
Sorry, yeah,
loaded with talent. And
right.
with the Chargers, loaded receiver core, a great running back room. I mean, they had a team down there and they managed to really suck. Like they were
Yeah,
bad. So
yeah.
Kellen Moore going to the Eagles is not any kind of really
No,
hopeful sign for Eagles fans.
and I know he's kind of got a reputation because they had some good offensive years in Dallas until they got to the playoffs, and he would draw up some cool plays and all that. But I don't like. I think he's kind of empty calories,
There
sort
was a
of as
lot more
coordinator. And
disappointment in Dallas than there were,
right,
like good moments.
and the Jalen Hurts scenario is kind of interesting too because he played great in 22, and last year he took a step back. And when
Oh
things
yeah.
got bad late in the year, he was a big reason why they were bad offensively. He did not
Oh
play
yeah.
good. Now the system wasn't that good. They didn't do a whole lot of motion. Um, they were really predictable, but he didn't play well. And now you're bringing in a new coordinator who maybe revives him, but it's a completely different system. And like, if it's going to be Kellen Moore's system, how much is Jalen Hurts going to be involved in a running game? Because that's when he plays his best, is when he's a threat to run and pass. He's a very good running quarterback. I feel like his shortcoming is pocket passing, and the teams that keep him in the pocket in the games where he doesn't run are the games where he struggles as a passer. And I mean, going back to his time in Dallas, Prescott's not a big runner, but it didn't seem like they kind of really had that package of plays for their quarterback to run. So maybe they do with the Eagles now, but if they don't, I think that hurts Jalen Hurts. Like he needs to have the ability to run, and he needs to have that threat of it, because what he's proven is that when he's exclusively just going to stand in the pocket, he ain't as good as when he's a threat to run too.
Well, and I think that it's more than just being a threat to run. I think it's a lot like what the Packers figured out with Aaron Rodgers for so long, is when he rolls out, he is just deadly. And like there's a different level of comfort when you're rolling out as a quarterback, as you can get away from all the chaos going on in the pocket. Navigating a pocket is tough, man. You're making reads while you're navigating, all these big bodies in front of you that are bouncing around. Being able to spin out and have some sort of clear space to look, I mean, that's totally different. And Aaron Rodgers was deadly being able to do that. And yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is obviously a great athlete. So, not only is it probably easier for him to be a quarterback when he's out on the run, but it's also a threat. So they have to honor that. The defense has to account for that, which is going to make his decision making even easier. So, yeah, you need someone who can. In my opinion, I just don't agree with them bringing in Kellen Moore. I don't see it. I don't see that. He's proven anything. Even with his time in Dallas, he was really kind of just a puppet of Jason Garrett, is what a lot of people felt like. It was sort of a weird situation to begin with, because he started out as being, higher on the depth chart than Dak Prescott, and then ends up being, Dak Prescott's coach, and just such a weird personal dynamic to try to navigate. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say in Dallas, I think last season was Dak Prescott's best year. And that was when Kellen Moore wasn't there. Mike McCarthy was his coordinator. So
and Mike McCarthy knows how to work with quarterbacks. We've seen that. Not that he's the greatest quarterback whisperer ever, but he's done pretty good. And so yeah, Kellen Moore in Philly, man, you've got a really nice roster in Philly, and I just don't have any confidence at all that they're even going to be a top 15 or 20 offense. I mean, he completely crashed the car with the Chargers. You had a lot of good pieces to work with there, and they weren't just bad. They were one of the worst. They were terrible, and that's where that's why I'm like, I just don't see it.
The Eagles still have a very good offensive line, even though Kelsey retired. They're still going to be really good up front. Yeah, and they have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith at receiver, who are good.
They're talented.
Dallas Goedert. They signed Saquon Barkley, I think he gets a little overrated because he can break some big runs. He'll have the one run where he goes for 50 yards, but then his other 15 yards, he'll go for 30 yards.
We saw that against him when we played him in London, right? There's like two different versions of him.
We saw it last season. They shut him down, and then I think he had one big run late in the game, but that's kind of what he is. He doesn't give you a whole lot, but then he can pop a big one. And that's what he's been throughout his career. Maybe he's better because he's going to have a better offensive line blocking for him. We'll see. But they're talented on offense. And they're talented on defense. They had some big holes. It seems like they've attacked those holes. So, I mean, I could see the Eagles winning that division. I think it's between them and the Cowboys. But I could also see the Eagles, missing the playoffs if things don't go right for them.
Yeah, so as far as, we've talked a little bit about, the Eagles and kind of how they're shaping up. But, I mean, as far as the Packers match up with them in this game, I think you're on the opposite side of where you used to be with the Packers, right? Whereas, like, what was it, 3 seasons in a row where they had to get popped in the mouth in the first game to realize it's time to play football. I feel like that's what's about to happen to the Eagles. Like, having, just so many new pieces come in, and now you got to mix with old pieces, and, this system and that system, it's different, it's the same, whatever. You can be talented and still have it fall apart. Like, they were talented last season. It's not like, now they've got Saquon Barkley. Now they're talented. No, I mean, they had a good roster last season, with Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, all these Dallas Goedert, the guys you mentioned. And their defense is very intimidating as far as the talent goes. So when you look at the players on the roster, you're like, dang, man, like, this is a tough team. Doesn't surprise me they started 10-1, but when they fall apart like that, man, like, yeah, that can be bad coaching, but those are those are some sensitive players, in my opinion, as well, right? Like you've got either some immature players or some sensitive personalities, maybe.
They didn't believe in the coaching, and
Right.
there's things on the record and off the record that they said last season that was like, whoa, like
Right.
they weren't afraid to bash some of the coaches and the coordinators, so they didn't believe in it. Maybe they do this year and it changes everything. But
Now, look at the difference, though. Like them not believing in what was going on and what happened. And we know that a lot of the Packers players didn't really believe in that defense either. But man, they put together some performances that were just like, again, I called it like out in spite of Joe Barry, right? It was like, we saw Jair go out and do a little bit of freestyling on his own. I think that there were some other players doing some of that as well. And they ended up making some good plays, and so I think there's two sides of that where there's like maybe a little bit more maturity on one roster where it's like, hey, this coaching staff isn't cutting it, but let's have some pride here. Let's at least try to salvage something and not embarrass ourselves. And then there's the other where it's just like, check it in, right? Like I'm good. And you get Troy Aikman questioning your effort on a playoff broadcast, and like that's
unbelievable.
Like when that was your last performance as a team, now you're going to tell me you're going to go travel down to Brazil and you're going to put together a sound performance as your first appearance as a new team. I just don't see it. I don't see, like some sort of shakeup in leadership that all of a sudden these guys are going to respect and fall in line, especially even, like even the coaches, right? Like the coordinators were talking about, like they're not coming from great places right now. So I think the Packers have potential to really come out looking very strong against the Eagles in this game. I mean, again, talent for talent, it's going to be tough matchups, but I think the Packers have the talent to match up against these guys. Let's say the defense, the Eagles defense comes out and, plays really well. I think you have not only the talent on the field for the Packers to challenge probably the depth of that defense, if anything, but you've also got, the playmaking mastermind, play calling mastermind of Matt LaFleur. He hasn't always been a mastermind. He's had some learning to do. I get it. He's also an emotional play caller. But I'm seeing more of LaFleur from the first game against the Bears in 2023, not LaFleur before that. I think you have a good potential here to see him, and we'll give Stenavich his due. Maybe he's coming around and learning how to be an offensive coordinator. I just like this offense is already gelled together. You don't have this question of, well, can these guys play together? This offense is gelled together, and you don't have anything changing either. It's doing is evolving. They're not changing any of the fundamentals. All they're going to do is build upon the things they already know. So that's where the Packers offense is well ahead of the Eagles offense, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to give this, like, we're not, going to go position by position, do a crazy breakdown, but I think this is a confident win, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll see.
No scores, none of that, but I think the Packers can confidently win this game. It'll be interesting, but I would also say that both teams will be different teams by the end of the season. That seems certain.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
But what about the second game here? What's the next one we got?
The Colts.
Yeah,
That's
Colts.
for the home opener, which is...
That one's kind of fascinating, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next two, the Colts and the Titans, weeks 2 and 3, they're teams that we're not real familiar with. They play in the AFC South. Packers don't see them very much on the schedule. They're not like teams with superstars, and you don't see them on national TV a whole lot, so we're not real familiar with them. But I think one of those two teams, I'm not sure which, probably would lean more Colts, but I think one of those two teams might surprise this year and be a contender in their division. Not saying a Super Bowl contender, but I think one of those two could be a playoff team and possibly win that division. The Colts, we'll see Anthony Richardson. He's an unknown too, because he only played 4 games last year and had a couple injuries, and
I think got a sample size.
Yeah, but he's big and he's got a cannon for an arm. He can run, he can pass. So that's going to be you get 2 quarterbacks weeks 1 and 2 that are big quarterbacks that like to run and are athletic. So that's going to be a big test for half these defense. A kind of a unique test for that defense. to see right off the bat, and it's going to challenge, some things, communication, knowing your assignments with the defense. So, yeah, big challenge right off the bat. I think the Colts have some interesting pieces. Jonathan Taylor, for you Badger fans. I know he was hurt a lot
He's so
last
good.
season. He is really good. He was hurt last season, so he missed a chunk of the season, but
Looks
he's
healthy
really
now.
right. One of the guys you liked in the draft, they took in the second round, Edie Mitchell.
Yep.
Michael Pittman Jr. is a good player. So that's going to be a tough one coming home. Kind of an unknown team for the Packers.
Stout defense, too.
Yeah, they can play some D. DeForest Buckner's a good player. Julian Blackman, who's a guy I liked in free agency at safety. We're fine with who we got at safety, but
Heck yeah.
the first round pick, Latue from UCLA. So I think they're going to be a tough team for the Packers. I mean, I don't want to pick games this far out from it, but they're going to be tested. That's not a game where I can sit here and be like, yeah, no problem. No matter what, they're going to handle the Colts.
Oh, okay. I guess we lost Tim. That's all right. I'll keep it going. Hopefully he jumps back in for us. But the Colts, I don't know where we lost him. The Colts is going to be a tough matchup. I don't think we're probably not looking at that as hard as we could. I think, again, we've talked a little bit about how the defense could struggle early in the year. That could be one that could give him a lot of trouble. Jonathan Taylor's an excellent running back when he's healthy. We got the left side. Tim gone. He's gone. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think he lost his signal. That's all right. We'll hang out. We'll see if he jumps back in. If not, I'll land this plane for us here in a minute. But appreciate y'all hanging with me. And good comment here by you are we need to open it up versus the Colts. They can run the ball, athletic QB, maybe tough. I really do think the Colts have a good chance of putting the Packers defense kind of on the ropes a little bit earlier, kind of popping in the mouth and not really letting off of the gas by, just slamming a heavy dose of Jonathan Taylor. But the Packers, fortunately, I think their offense is going to be able to pick up the slack. If the defense struggles early with things like communication, how do you handle athletic quarterbacks with multiple option goes, and things like that? Historically, they struggled with the read option, right, against Kaepernick all those years. But that is a tough challenge. That always will be a tough challenge for a defense because of how many options there are. If they give up a lot of points in the home opener there, I think the way this team is built, the offense can pick up that slack. I think we can start getting more excited about the Packers offense and their potential to do that. And I think last year the shoe was on the other foot. The defense really needed to be able to carry the offense through some tough learning curves. They did it in some cases, in others they weren't able to. But I think the offense holds up their end of the deal here and can really support that defense until they get going and firing on all cylinders. But the Colts game is going to be a tough one. You might have to win a shootout there in order to get that W. And then let's see here, the game we've got after that, he said that we were looking at the Titans. The Titans is an interesting one too. I think, in my opinion, between the Colts and the Titans, the Colts are a little bit more intimidating. But, the Titans, let's see here, they could be up and coming. I'm not a big, I don't know. All right, now we're looking at it. The Will Levis at quarterback. I'm not a big Will Levis believer. Tony Pollard at running back, fine. Yeah, you know what? I don't know how tough that's going to be. I might chalk that up as a confident win against Tennessee. Obviously Derrick Henry's not there anymore. They do have some talent on defense there, as I'm seeing, but again, the Packers offense is going to be tough, man. Like, the amount of weapons they have on this offense is just nasty. So yeah, are saying the Titans are going to be a horrid team. I don't know. I'm not good at projecting stuff like that. I mean, teams surprise you all the time. But like I said, I'm not a huge believer in Will Levis. So I think your offense with the Titans, you're probably going to struggle. You got a few weapons there, DeAndre Hopkins and Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley, but it's just they're good, but those aren't scaring a defensive coordinator these days. Like that's unless you've got a all-pro quarterback throwing to him. Will Levis could surprise some people. Maybe he develops into an all-pro quarterback. But, yeah, the Tennessee game is not particularly intimidating to me. That's your third game there. Let's see here. I can't even remember if that's a home game or not. But either way, like at that point, the defense has had a chance to correct some potential communication issues. But you're going to start to see some momentum. The offense is going to be comfortable at that point, I think. I don't know that the Tennessee defense is going to have the ability to really throw them off from what they're doing. So, I don't know how much I would say the Colts is a confident win. That's a toss. I think the Colts could really give you a struggle, but I'd say the Tennessee is a confident win. Let's see here. R is actually giving us some local perspective. Says lives in Tennessee, likes Levis, but they are not good. Yeah, I don't have a hard time believing that. There's just you look at the names on their depth chart, and it's like, there's a couple names there, but you really aren't intimidating anybody. That's the thing. It's like there's other rosters you look at, and the top to bottom, it's like, dang man, how do you deal with those guys? And this just isn't that roster. So yeah, it should be like right now. Let's call it 2-1 right now that we're starting at as far as the swag that I'm throwing at it. And then the next game after that, of course, is the Vikings. All right, the Vikings. Now hang on a second. We got to find out, is the Vikings game at home or is that away? That makes a big difference, but. Getting to play the Vikings there with that fourth game, you got 3 games under your belt before you've got to go take on Justin Jefferson, and I gotta see Aaron Jones wearing purple. Nobody wants to see that, but we got to do it. So yeah, by the fourth game, you've gotten some issues worked out. Whatever ends up happening, that is at Lambeau against Minnesota. They've got a new quarterback with you could say maybe Darnold wins the role, but. McCarthy's there. He's obviously trying to win the role. Who knows if he's going to be a good quarterback or not. But if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. That's the thing. So in that situation, I don't think they're going to have their quarterback room figured out by week 4. So your defense probably has a good time against that offense. Aaron Jones will have his say in things. He'll get going. But, you're going to have to do more than that to get going against this Packers defense. I think at that point there's some momentum there. Like I said, you've corrected some mistakes, and you should be ready for a familiar opponent in this case. So looking forward to that one. I'm always excited to see the Packers beat the Vikings. It's one of the most satisfying things ever. You guys all know what I'm talking about. But, so as we look at the Vikings depth chart, their defense is still probably going to be pretty good. Their offense obviously has weapons, but again, who's the quarterback and how good is the quarterback going to play is going to be a big deal. They've got some, good guys on the O-line. You obviously got TJ Hawkinson. So you can't overlook the Vikings here, and you look at their defense, the defense looks pretty stout, so I think they are in a transition year. I don't think they're, going to win the division or compete for the division. Obviously, injuries can have a say in that. But the Vikings, they're not going to roll over on you. They're going to give you a tough matchup. And, they've gone to Lambeau pretty well. So you can't write that one off. But I do think that the Packers will find a way to win that game. it's going to be a fun one to watch. I mean, there's a lot of matchups there, again, with the Packers offense going up against a pretty good Vikings defense. I really am excited to see how strategically the offense evolves. Last year, they had to go back to fundamentals in a lot of ways. They had to do a lot of things that were more simple. You had to really go a little bit slower in what you're introducing to do to beat a defense. You can hit the gas a little bit more this season. Like I said, that you're not replacing anything. You're not going back to the drawing board on anything. With everybody there on the offense, you're just building on what they already know. That's a huge advantage in helping these guys play to the best of their abilities. So I think that the Packers offense will be cooking early. I think it'll be tough for these defenses to slow down from a strategic perspective and from just a pure talent perspective. The Packers are loaded. I don't need to tell you all that. Whether the defense can slow down Justin Jefferson or not, that's a big question, and it's not hard to see that you've got the talent to do that. You've got talented DBs now from, corner to safety. You've got speed and athleticism at your linebacker level. You've got a deep, deep D line. Those guys will always be rotating and fresh, and that's a big deal. Like, that was a big piece of the Packers' last Super Bowl team in 2010. They had a deep D line, and those guys were always fresh, giving the O-line hell. So I think there's a lot to love right now. We're just kind of glancing at the first 4 games just because it is the offseason, and there's only so much to talk about. We did say a lot about Ed Policy, though. Very excited, I think, to see that decision be made. There's a lot to wonder about who these people are and these decisions that get made. And we talked a lot about Mark Murphy really nailing a lot of those decisions as he had to navigate since 2008, essentially. He did it well, and you just never know, right? There's a lot of potential for those moves to go wrong, and it seems like Ed Policy is the right guy. So very excited to see that. Very excited for this Packers season. So we're going to go through probably and talk a little bit more about the games that are on the schedule and do a little bit kind of just a flyover really of the matchups, nothing too in-depth, but fun stuff to talk about, looking at things like how do you lock up Justin Jefferson? Who's it going to be? Will we get to see Jair, shadow him? I would like to see that, but there's a lot to be seen about Hafley's defense, so we're going to find out. And hopefully by week 4, we've got a little bit of a taste of it and a little bit of an understanding. But until then, Packers fans, I appreciate y'all being with us this evening. We did lose Tim. His internet dropped off on him, so, that is what it is. Sometimes technology messes with us, and we just got to roll with it. But I appreciate y'all having some patience with us there and sticking with me here to land this podcast and hanging out with us this Monday night on the Packers Weekly Podcast, which is part of PackersTalk.com network. If y'all would, you want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Subscribe, follow us on all the socials, and subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. All those things help us out greatly. They don't take much on your side. And we will see y'all next week, Monday at 9:30, Packers fans. Go, Pack, go.